Hey NAI football fans, Corey Thorpe here with another edition of the NAIFBALL podcast powered by AdCraft USA, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts. Our friends at AdCraft have been with us for many years now. They've run web stores for us multiple times. These guys are NAI fans and family who are experts in the apparel and merchandise world. AdCraft allows you to take the hassle out of ordering. Let their knowledgeable design and customer service staff handle everything from hosting the store online, shipping the product, and helping your customers so you can get back to the game. Find them online at adcraftusa.com. All right, NAI football fans, this is Corey Thorpe, and welcome back to another edition of the NAIF Ball podcast powered by AdCraft Custom Apparel and Merch, your trusted experts in the apparel, merch, and uniform fields. Since 1974, we are going back from the Northwest corner of the United States, and we are heading back to the heartland, the Great Plains Athletic Conference tonight. We're all decked out. Matt's got his Dakota Wesleyan hat on. I've got a Northwestern shirt on. We're decked out. We are ready to rock. So, first up on our list, starting from the bottom as always, that is going to be Briarcliff. Briarcliff going 1-10 last year, 1-9 in the GPAC. That's good for 78th overall, and it's good that we're not starting in the 80s and the 90s. That's a nice floor for the GPAC last year.
100%. And I think, too, with the GPAC, something that I always preach, I'm definitely biased. So take that with a grain of salt. I went to Dakota Wesleyan for people who are listening that don't know me. But top to bottom every year, this conference is super competitive. Whether you're at the, like I said, top or bottom, like anybody can beat anybody with the exception of a few teams, obviously, that we'll get to later. But even this Briarcliff team that on paper is 1-10 had a really good offense last year. Usually a team known for their defense in years past, but their offense this year was pretty solid. They had a really good traditional spread, good quarterback, good receivers, able to make plays, and it definitely helped them out.
Yeah, and you talk about that defense. They're bringing back Brett Tinker there, that linebacker position. 40th offensive for S&P, 85th there, defensive S&P. This is where I think this is the conference where S&P really, or SP plus S&P, the old name of it. So, us old people have to sometimes slip into old patterns of thinking. I think this is really where SP Plus is really going to help us, because you're adjusting out Morningside and Northwestern, and you're really getting to see the true rating of a team without the offensive juggernauts that those two really just tip the scales if you just look at a yards per play number. So if you go back and compare this to other conferences, you might go, man, I don't know what they're thinking. Well, they're including those two teams at the end of our program that really heavily tilt the balance. But yeah, you've got Brett Tinker coming back. That's 104 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, a 1.5 tackles for loss. And I guess that's a good thing. You've got no GPAC, all GPAC leaving. So it's not like you're losing any talent, but you're not retaining a lot of high-level talent, unfortunately, for BCU.
Yeah, I think it going into next season, they have a lot to work with. Like I said, that offense that we would prepare against at Wesleyan, like they still did a lot of good things. They just have raw athletes every year, whether or not their record reflects how cohesive they play together. They always just have dudes. They bring in dudes. They do well in the portal, usually bringing guys in. So it'll be fun to see next year.
And they do return basically all their offense. Luke Davies returns at quarterback. Asante Anglin leads the running backs back, and Spencer George leads back the wide receivers. And aside from that one linebacker and a couple of DBs, you're basically returning all of your defense. and that's a good place to be, honestly.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, let's let the hat match the slide here for a second. Second up is Dakota Wesleyan, 66th in SP Plus, 2-9 overall, 2-8 in the GPAC. A very balanced split there, offensively and defensive, in terms of the rankings.
For sure. And I get to do my part and spread a bit of propaganda here. So this will be fun to try to spin this. Obviously, last season, for I guess I could say us, I played on that team, even though I am now graduated. Was very frustrating. A lot of games that were like one score away, a couple plays difference from winning. You talk about,
Down.
you want Dakota State to go your way. You want the Jamestown game that slipped out of your fingers to go your way. You're in it with Midland and all this other in Concordia and just,
Down.
Doan. Oh, I don't even. I that game's out of my head. I don't even want to acknowledge it. A lot of, I don't want to say coin flip games, but a lot of situations where you get even half those games back, you're looking at a much more competitive record. And I think the SP Plus helps a little bit in showing that, there were bright spots definitely on this team. And they're bringing back a lot of the bright spots. A lot of the fourth year guys last year that were all conference are going to be coming back. Jamin Aaron and Adam DeYoung, who was actually an All-American, very impressive, returning for their fifth seasons, obviously. Super good to have that experience and talent back. The only major piece you're losing next year is TJ Benton, who was a fifth-year, multiple-time all-conference guy. But there's just a lot of experience on this team returning next year. And honestly, there's so many pieces coming back. And in the offseason, for once, I could tell you from an inside perspective, it didn't seem like during spring ball there was as much adjustment going on, whether it was switching guys to different positions, trying to figure out, what positions are we short at, like moving guys around. There wasn't a lot of that. And I think it's going to fit to where team can get comfortable. Bringing back those fifth-year guys, like I said, is a huge part of that. All your leadership comes back. And a lot of that defense that was really, really, really good pretty much is all returning. So a lot of good things for the Tigers to come up.
Matt, I'm just going to say that a heavier use of the fullback may have helped in those one-score games. No matter how much we spammed the comments with "give 40 the ball," just didn't help.
Hey, it's the way the dice rolls sometimes, right? For those that don't know, I did play tight end fullback hybrid in our offense, so that's the whole joke there. C-gap enthusiast, I like to tell people, but hey, you know what? When you're on a team that can air it out with Austin Lee and Keel Nelson and all those guys coming back, which they all are, like sometimes it's not as necessary as I would like it to be. So
that's true. You do have a little bit of a quarterback dilemma here between Austin Lee and Connor Drake, though, who split time basically throughout the season.
Yeah, I will say too, it's Austin, typically speaking. I mean, the whole idea of like, well, no job is set, but Austin is obviously you're older, 2 years older maybe, has more experience. I can't remember how old Connor is. I'm not going to lie. But has been battling injury for a good chunk of his career. That's why you saw Connor kind of take some reps, because Austin was battling a shoulder injury a good chunk of last year, which for your quarterback is very unideal. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Hopefully Austin can get comfortable and not get injured. That would be great. But Connor's more than capable if he has to step in.
Well, we'll see if Dakota Wesleyan can get it across the goal line. Next team up there.
Come on. Oh, come on now. You really have to go in this order?
It was unfortunate, but I had to make that transition somehow, Matt. For those who don't know, Dakota Wesleyan was a goal line play shy of defeating the Doane Tigers, who were 4-6 last year. And look, I mean, here's the thing: that's 65 and 66th in SP Plus, and that's a 2-game swap. I mean, that speaks to exactly what you were talking about. With if a couple of games go your way, for Dakota Wesleyan. You see a Doane team that's effectively, now they've got a much worse offense and a much better defense, but you see how that goes with the records. Yes, records are what we're after at the end of the day, but they don't always tell the whole story.
100%. I'd wholeheartedly agree with that statement after the past few seasons have gone. But looking at this Doane team, bias aside, really, really good defensive unit last year. Run a 3-3 stack, which is very unique, especially in the GPAC. I think, honestly, across a lot of phases of football right now, a 3-3 stack is pretty unique and pretty hard to pull off. And Doane had the personnel to pull it off last year. Very solid defensive unit. Obviously, something to be desired on offense there, but their defense filled that hole of keeping them in games a lot of the time last year. Obviously, with the guys on defense, they have a good chunk of them returning, about half of them coming back. But most notably for returning for them, they have their kicker and punter, who was really solid last year, Kellen Meyer, and their kick returner and wide receiver, Jeremiah Payne, who I know gave us a few problems during that game last year. Really solid player. Can definitely make things happen on what is otherwise a pretty stagnant offense. But they have a good chunk of their team coming back.
I'm just going to point out that you don't always have to have a great offense, but Kellen Meyer there, with 16 of 31, sometimes those wins on the Plains catch the ball and take it every which way. So not gonna, knock that too much. Along of 54 though, so
yeah,
42.3 average on punts, was second team all GPAC as a kicker and a punter. Had a long of 86 yards, and that'll 86 any bad field position that you've got for sure. That's the longest I've seen so far, and I really don't expect to see anything higher than 86.
Yeah, and you see longs like that and kicking like that paired with as good as their defense was last year, like that's a recipe for success. And you could see, even being a 4-6 team, they were competitive in so many games last year. Like truthfully down to the bitter end. Like they were in most of them. So
the problem is going to be for Doane that there's not a lot of the teams around them are bringing back a lot of talent. So unless you got a really, really good infusion of high school talent, you might see the Doane Tigers take a step back this year. You do return Cruz Kirwan at quarterback and Brian Lambert and Jeremiah Payne, like we said, at wide receiver. But overall, no running backs are returning. They were all seniors, and about half your defense is returning. So it's a distinct possibility that you're going to take a step back.
100%.
Next up in the GPAC is the newest addition to the GPAC. Has only been on the scene for a couple years, but honestly is one of the more impressive of the bottom half, at least to me, and that's going to be Mount Marty. Their record doesn't look as good, 3-8, 2-8, but look at that yards per play. You're looking at 5.31 offensive and 5.49 defensive. You're to be 3 up from the bottom and be at this point, and we'll see it drop back a little bit when we get to Jamestown next. But what Mount Marty is building up there in Yankton is they might be one of the next teams to emerge out of the GPAC and join that top echelon.
They could. They should probably beat their rivals first, if you ask me. But all nasty bias aside, which, by the way, D-Dub is undefeated since 1905 against Mount Marty, if you wanted context.
Only
very solid.
Twice.
What?
So they've only played them twice, but I mean, small sample size.
I think the story is that they used to have a football team way back.
They
were,
did. World War II did a lot of things.
They might have even been yanked in college. I don't even know if they were Mount Marty. There's a whole deal. But Yeah, very well-rounded team, very solid team. All this to say, I can talk all this trash, but at the end of the day, they are a very well-rounded team, and like you said, the record doesn't really reflect um, how competitive they were. That Doan game, holy cow, was the week before they played Dakota Wesleyan last year, and watching the film of them claw their way back in a matter of what, 2 minutes? Do you remember that game?
I think I do. Yeah.
Yeah, baffling. They fight to the bitter end. They're a physical group of guys, good size. They have good coaching too. Like all the pieces are there. It's just a matter of putting it together for them. And they're a new program. Like it's been a couple years. What you've seen so far is impressive. And I think going forward, like you said, they're going to be fighting their way into that upper echelon of the conference. They have Jonah. They have Jonah coming back. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm not even going to try. Rex Reichen, who, fun fact, used to be a Dakota Wesleyan Tiger for all of a summer
Yikes.
before kind of stepping back for a bit, reevaluating, and going back home to play for Mount Marty. Who was really good at the tight end position and some really solid O line coming back.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that quarterback Ken Gay is really good. I mean, the offense really runs through him. You return all your running backs, you return all your wide receivers. The folks over at Mount Marty were very, very happy about what they had coming back when we chatted. We do try to chat with all the teams just to make sure that those who we say are coming back are, and those who we say that are leaving are. All 11 starters on offense and their defensive top contributors are back. You're really only losing Drew Pendleton at the linebacker position, with 10 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. You are going to miss him along with nearly a century of tackles there, but this is a team that you might want to watch. This is one that could make that jump into the top half of the conference. This is really this is they're still kind of on their initial recruits still, and really the true test is going to be in a couple years. Can they keep it up once their first and second and third sets of graduating seniors have really left? But right now, it's going to be interesting on the initial push to see how high Mount Marty can go.
And I think there's something to be said too for keeping around your initial guys, right? Like I feel like a new program coming into the NAIA, coming back into college football, like there's so much that can go wrong. And a lot of those guys have stuck it out. I feel like even last year we were having the conversation of they're almost there. The coaching is in place. They have a really good coaching staff. Um,
I think
Former Kansas Wesleyan guys, like really experienced group. Um, and those guys that have stuck around, like they're all really talented. They're another year together. Like they could really be making the jump.
and that could have actually put them back a little bit. I don't know if you remember in the wee infancy days of Mount Marty, John Micheletti was not their first head coach.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
it was it
Oh
was a
gosh.
Woodley. It was a Woodley. It was Joe Woodley from Grandview's dad who came out of retirement to come coach Mount Marty. Um, he gets a coaching staff in place, doesn't make it well. I mean, he's still alive. I mean, he made it that way, but he stepped back before the first game of the season, and John Micheletti steps in. But I mean, you're talking about a coaching change before you even step on the field for your first
Yeah.
fall. Uh,
Mhm.
that can't be good for a team. I can't imagine. But that being said, you're still at this point. So despite that, it's a good position for Mount Marty to be in. If you're a Lancers fan, you should be pretty pleased so far.
100%. I think so.
Next up on the list is mine and John's dark horse from last year. It's me, the Jamestown Jimmies, the Pumpkinheads, 4-7, 3-7 in conference. They did do very well last year in kind of their lane. Jamestown has had a history. I think terrible is putting it mildly. And so to be at this point for Coach Brian Mistro is a really, really big spot. You're almost smack dab in the middle of the NAI now at 58th out of 98 teams. Um, that's really good growth for where Jamestown was 2018, 2019.
100%. And I was recruited by Mistro when he was at Concordia Moorhead. I can't remember if I told this story last year when we did the GPAC preview or not, but I'll tell it again because why not? Was recruited by Mistro to go play D3 out there in Minnesota and didn't end up going because he ended up taking the Jamestown job, ended up at Wesleyan in the same conference. And he's a really good program builder. Um, as examples, what we've seen of a Jamestown team that has traditionally not been very competitive, even in the North Star, which you could probably argue you can definitely argue is a weaker conference than the GPAC. Coming into these behemoths and giants of NAIA football, and holding their own. They've been really impressive. Obviously, my experience in North Dakota playing that game last year was a pretty one. I'm not gonna lie. But that's a testament to how talented they were last year and how well coached they are and how they stay the course.
Yeah, and they had a really good offense last year, 42nd.
Oh yeah.
And that was headed up by Cade Torgerson at quarterback, and unfortunately he is leaving. Is Cade Torgerson? They're going to have a battle in camp for the quarterback spot there. And honestly, Jamestown's season always gets started early. They're always one of the first playing that paint bucket game against Valley City State. This year it is August the 24th.
Oh my God.
I
That's like
know.
week -1. That's not even week 0.
It is a beautiful thing, and I am absolutely here for it, and I am glad that I don't have to go through camp for it.
Yes.
But that being said, you do bring back Paul Vandal, 50 tackles, 20 and a half tackles for loss, 12 of those being sacks. You are losing Isaac Miles. Somehow the GPAC has two of the top, 5 punters in the NAIA between Miles and the dude from Doane, Kellen Meyer. Only a 67 long for Miles there, but
Yeah. Fun fact about Miles in the Wesleyan game: he was the first punter I've ever seen get ejected for targeting in a game.
Well, if you're gonna
Fun
get a
fact
hit,
there.
you might as well make it count.
Yeah, and you know what? Kudos to him because I've never seen a punter stick his nose in there like he did on the God. It was a botched extra point attempt that went the other way for us for 2 points, but by God, Isaac did his damnedest to stop it.
He was gonna get in there, wasn't he? So they do return a majority of their offense. Now they are losing, of course, Cade Torgerson, their quarterback extraordinaire, but they do bring back most of their running backs, led by Zach Hammett, and a majority of their wide receivers, led by Micah Madian. So yeah, that averages out to a majority. Half your D line returns, most of your linebackers return, a majority of your DBs return. So it's an interesting spot for the Jimmies as you are kind of turning over a little bit of your team.
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious to see who takes the reins at quarterback. Their quarterback last year was really good, very much a gunslinger type. That's kind of how their offense rolled. A lot of airing it out, and I'm curious to see how that position gets filled because their wide receivers are a really solid group of athletes. And I think if you get another guy in there that can make some of the deep throws that their quarterback was making last year, they on the offensive side, at least, might not miss a step. To be honest with you.
We're gonna step aside and be right back after this message from AdCraft. That is the truth there. Adcraft is the best in the business. And we are so grateful to have them on our side. Side note that I'm going to have to edit out. I'm going to have to edit in that music because that came straight out of my laptop. But I have the technology to edit that back in. Ha ha.
You're showing them, Corey.
Showing up my own stupidity. That should be our catchphrase around here. Smart enough to atone for my own stupidity. Well, next up on our list, we are in the top half now. These are the guys that really showed out last year, and that really starts with the Bulldogs of Concordia. And they, 4-6. You're talking about 40th. Your top half in the NAIA had a really good defense and an offense that was pretty pedestrian. But you're still around that break-even point in terms of yards per play.
100%. And this is a Concordia team that had a losing record, but was still in the top half of SP Plus, which is just insane when you really think about it. Like a 4-6 team that was in a lot of close games, and even at one point taking it to the potential national champions, which I feel like we will get to that game when we talk about Northwestern more so.
Yeah,
It was a big turning point for the Red Raiders in their season.
But Jalen Graham's dad.
Yeah, a Concordia team that very clearly was hyper competitive, and they're always known for their insane defenses. Lane Napier, I feel like, has been there for literally ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of that defense, you do have Devin Pauly, Michael Grindy coming back. Grindy, the first team selection. Really, who you're going to miss is Cole Moose. Look, that dude was a beast. You knew it was going to Cole Moose. 1,024 in terms of yardage, 12 touchdowns. And if he didn't get it done down the field, then they just made him punt it with 40 yards per punt. And what is it with the GPAC and absurd longs? 71 was his longest punt. I feel like that's a pretty good punishment for a wide receiver. Hey, you don't make the catch, you got to punt
it. Everything just means more in the GPAC, Corey. It all just means more.
SEC. No, we're kidding. They do have a lot coming back though. DJ McGarvey at quarterback coming back. Devin Ziegler at running back returns. Carson Arline headlines a minority of wide receivers. So you really, if you're McGarvey, you've got to put in some work here in the offseason with your dudes to make sure that you get on the same page. See if you can find the next Cole Moose.
I think they will. They always have guys come out of the woodworks for them. A very stout program that works guys through the system. Very solid coaching staff over there. I know some of their coaches, and really good. I mean, really good group of dudes. Like you see it every year. They're very much middle to pushing towards the top half of the GPAC.
And you talk about that defense. The good news, if you're a Bulldogs fan, is that they return nearly all of it. Basically, the only thing you don't return out of your top contributors is a DB or two, and that's not good news for that bottom half of the GPAC. It's not good news if you're Hastings, Midland, or Dort either, because you feel like Concordia might be able to steal a couple of these games from the teams that really were solidly in the top half.
100%, yeah.
Now, the surprise team for me that I'm ashamed to say I wasn't paying much attention to, and I should have been, was Hastings. Now, I went back and I reminded myself. I went back to my old notes, and I looked, and Hastings in 2021 was not great. They were middling, and I didn't have a lot of hope for them. Looking at my notes now, see if I can find what they were from last year. Yeah, they were 2-8 in 2021. They were only returning Kobe Brandenburg and losing Tyree Nesmith at running back. But by Jove, they put it together on the back of a lot of really great players on defense. And honestly, to see 4.69 yards per play, if you're in any other conference, that's But when you're in the GPAC and you've got to deal with some dudes named Dolanchek and Gramstad, um, that's pretty much an elite defense.
And this is traditionally a Hastings team that is very good on offense, with a defense that can get the job done. Their defense, they always knew, at least during my time playing in this conference, they had guys on defense. The way that this front seven started the year for Hastings, and they made their way into the rankings, which first time in a while that's happened for them. So good for them. A front seven group that was just dominating teams, absolutely dominating. Up front, like all conference guys, a very solid front four, and linebackers who could fly around and clean up the pieces. Like it just clicked for them, especially in the beginning of the season. Obviously, a lot of the really good teams, they kind of were able to dodge until the end of the season. But that's not to say that they were bad by any means. They were a very, very good team that turned it around from the past few years.
It's really going to be interesting to see if Hastings can use that as a springboard, because you do lose an absolute ton of what you had. Obviously, you have Lathan Shaw being the pretty much the only guy from that front seven that's coming back. You have a first team all conference kick returner who had 2 kick return touchdowns, a second team punt returner that averaged 15 yards per return, and they're both on your offense. They'll be looking to step up into bigger roles as Esch is pretty much kind of your headliner for your wide receivers. Antoine Murphy is going to be your headliner for one of your few running backs. You have you had John Zamora. Zamora's gone. You got to figure out who's going to be your signal caller. You lose Simonson, who was good out of the backfield and catching the ball, and the aforementioned Kobe Brandenburg, who had 10 PBUs along with 4 picks. But man, the outlook, unless you brought in some dudes and were able to really use 2022 as a springboard, you might see the Broncos take a step back. I'm not saying they're going to be 2-8 again, but you might see them take a step back into a more 500 kind of place.
I could totally see that happening. I don't know. It's always very interesting to see in such a short amount of time a team go from pretty much the bottom to beating good teams, being ranked, making noise towards the top half of the conference, playing in meaningful games. I mean, when they played Morningside, they, I think, only had one loss or might have still been undefeated at that point. They were still very much at the top of the conference.
Now, if I remember correctly, and it's been about a week since I put all this together, but this is only Matt Franzen's like second or third. Yeah, this next year will be Franzen's third year in the program. Traditionally, that second year is when you really have that good bump in terms of performance. You have a good mix of the guys that are coming in that are your guys. You have the best that are remaining out of the former coaches' guys, and you kind of have a best of both worlds. And so you're really going to have to, the recruiting's got to be there. And honestly, if you're Hastings, you do have a history to fall back on. You've got Tom freaking Osborne, the guy that the NAIA trophy's named after, the savior of Nebraska football. But you can't lean on that. You've got to make your own way now if you're Hastings.
100%. And I think that with all the new things happening for them, it's finally in place. They're kind of making their own way with what they have now.
Coming into the top 4, that starts with the Midland Warriors, 19th in SP plus, and honestly, did we have them ranked at the end of the season? 8-3 team, 7-3 the GPAC. You're talking about a 19th ranked team. I don't think I remember them being in our top 25, but this kind of shows that they should have been floating around the bottom, maybe even receiving votes range.
I mean, they were certainly, I know for a fact they were receiving votes for a good chunk of the year. They did end the season with 2 losses back to back to Northwestern and Dort, which is probably what did them in on our list. But this was a team that for 2/3 of the year was ranked in the top 20 for us, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I mean, this was a good Midland team.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting. We're still 4 from the top, and we're still looking at a negative yards per play. This is why, again, I'll harp on this. This is why SP Plus opponent adjusted metrics are so important to have, because this was a really good team, but you had 2 teams that were elite at the top of your 11 team league, and when almost a quarter of your team is truly elite, that spells doom for the other 75%.
And I mean, you are looking at a Midland team who, on the defensive side of the ball, always really good on defense, right? Their front 4, their linebackers are mean, nasty. They get after it, high motor guys, like very athletic. What was interesting to me about this Midland team is on the offensive side of the ball, they were very ground and pound, like a very run heavy first Midland team, which in years past, they'd like to air it out. They like to be flashy. They like to be in your face. That's their whole MO. And for the first time, like it was a complete 180 from what they were last year or the season prior in 2021 on offense. And I think that threw teams off. I think it really threw people for a loop and it worked to their benefit. And they have those running backs coming back. Trevor Jones for Midland, notably coming back, who was their leading rusher. And I think that they're going to stick with it next year. It really worked for them. They have the personnel coming back to do it. And I just think going forward, it's going to be interesting to see because it is still different from the Midland I'm used to seeing. But I mean, hell, when you have that good of a defense, you can kind of play around with the offense and the rest will figure itself out.
The biggest question is how are you going to replace Chase Lipsis and Trevor Havlicek? I mean, that's defensive line is so important. We talk about how important the offensive line is. Everyone knows, I've had John Cooper here beside me for years and years and years touting the offensive line. But I'm going to tell you, if you ain't got a good defensive line, you ain't winning squat. And losing 2 all-conference guys like that may be a problem for them. But, I mean, you know me, Matt. I'm not going to be able to leave this page without giving some love to the first team long snapper. Man, it's such an underrated part of the game. But I've seen it in big games. 2018 with Benedictine and Morningside in the national championship. It's a bad snap. Benedictine loses the ability to flip the field, and Morningside goes and wins their first national championship. If your long snapper isn't on his game, whether it be on a punt or an extra point, a field goal, it changes the tenor of a game. And so you're really going to have to find someone that you trust to snap the ball, and losing a first-team all-conference guy there, that's not something you can just overlook.
100%. And I mean, special teams is still a third of the game, isn't it?
Absolutely. They may not play a third of the time, but, you will have to replace a lot of that defense there, especially at defensive line, like we said. A few of the linebackers return, but not a lot. So you've got to replace a good bit for you if you're Midland. One team that's kind of been, I'll borrow a term, the tent of suspicion here for a little bit in the GPAC. Some years they're ripping it up, and some years they're a little more pedestrian, but has still been on our radar. It's going to be Dort. And you're talking about a 7-3 team here from last year, 17th in overall SP plus with a top 10 offense. These guys are ground and pound. They will hate to hear me say that because they'll say that they are more optiony, and they are. They do a great job with their RPOs, and that's how they make it work. But you've got to have a good quarterback, and they do have one in Cade McDaniel. But man, that's an art form if you can get it right.
Yeah, triple option is really fun to talk about until you have to play it and are on the other side of it. And I'll tell you, as somebody who did that for 4 years, it was not fun. Playing Dort is not fun. It sucks, like straight up. Preparing for it in practice, like they are difficult. They're so difficult to prepare for. And no, last year was no exception. I will say, last year, I don't want to say they took a step back because this is still a team that only lost 3 games and was probably third best team in the conference. But like, this is still a Dort team that probably wasn't up to par with the past couple seasons that you saw. And that's even all things considered with a top 10 offense, a 7-3 record, and a top 20 metric team. Like, that's insane that I'm saying that.
Now, I will say, 2022 was kind of I won't call it a rebound year for them, but it was definitely a year where I think they found their footing. 2021 was a difficult year for Dort. They're still 7-3, but they really didn't have the quarterback that they wanted to run that offense. You'd had an Iowa State transfer that was running your offense for the past however many years, and they didn't know who they had behind him to really run that offense the way it should. I think they found someone in Cade McDaniel to run it, and I think you'll see them get back up to the top. I mean, this is a Dort team that in a down year in 2021 was still second in the conference in offensive yards per play. They had 7.14 yards per play. So yes, did their offense regress a little bit? Sure. They lost a lot of offensive linemen. They lost Levi Jungling there at wide receiver. But this is a team that can make life difficult for a lot of GPAC teams, and they've got a lot coming back. Offensive line is huge for Dort. You've got 2 all-conference offensive linemen. You've got 2 all-conference defensive backs. Lord knows you need those in the GPAC. It's. I don't feel like you can ever call them like a. I feel like you can't make Dort a dark horse team because they're so known now. But this is a team that can absolutely. This could be an 8-2 team next year, and have your only losses be Morningside and Northwestern.
It's very much a conversation the past few years of like, will they finally be up to that echelon with Northwestern and Morningside? And I feel like, I mean, they had a playoff appearance not too long ago, correct?
They did. And it was a season in which they went 8-2, and they played 2 tight games with Northwestern and Morningside. And when you do that, you really have a solid shot of getting in.
Yeah. And so this is, I'm excited to see next season with everything they have coming back, how Dort does. And like you said, you can't call them a dark horse. Like, they are at the point where calling them a dark horse is discrediting them.
Now, Matt, you've talked about all night long here tonight as we record that the GPAC is always a conference that has to be reckoned with, that it's a tough way to do it week in, week out. And I think that bears itself out. As we look at the bigger picture, 4 out of the last 5 national champions are teams from the GPAC. And in that 5th year, the GPAC team was the runner-up. So you've had
Yeah.
at least a runner-up for you're going on the better part of a decade now. And this is why all this is why all the stats get thrown out the window on defense, because freaking Morningside is out here almost getting a first down every play.
Yeah. I mean, what can you say about Morningside that hasn't been said, truthfully? The only reason they slowed down last year is because of an injury to Joe Dolanchek, who is one conference player of the year, All-American, like every accolade to his name, multiple time national champion. Him getting injured was the only hitch in this team all year. And that's still to say that they were like a top 2 team in the country.
The problem is that you also lost Johansson at the same time. And so Morningside in the playoffs was forced to deal with, oh crap, how do we deal with this? And deal with it they did. I mean, give credit to them that the team they lost to was an underranked team in Kaiser that, look, was a dang good football team. There's you can't be too down on yourself losing to that. I mean,
Yeah, 100%.
And look, they're bringing back an absolute wealth of talent. It's getting to it got to the point where I had to separate the slides again. Somehow they always have a punt returner at wide receiver that's underused on the wide receiver side. It was Schweigert a couple years ago, and he comes out of the woodwork and has a great year. Watch Michael Payne this year. They might not have some of their OGs that they've got. You know, there's no Reed Jurgensmeyer here anymore. There's no Austin Johnson. He's leaving. You know, there's no Schweigert anymore. But you've got Zach Norton. And by gum, they're going to have someone at wide receiver who returns punts like Michael Payne. They always do a great job with their tight ends. And then you've got Isaiah Pingle coming back. Brody Nelson's coming back. He wasn't an all-conference pick. You've got Johnny Walls coming back at DB. You've got Lonell Boyd coming back at DB. You've got Jamal Jones at corner, who was not an all-conference, but was someone who we were told to keep an eye out on. And it's just, you're primed for a good year, if but at one position. And that's going to be quarterback.
Yeah, which for Morningside is a very unique problem to have for them.
To be fair, they're rather good at replacing quarterbacks. Their last 3 quarterbacks have all been national players of the year. I don't know of anyone else who's been able to do that with any regularity. You know, I said after that 2018 game to John, I went, look, that offense was so good. I don't know how they can bounce back. And John looked at me and went, oh, don't worry. They will. There's just no straight face. Oh, don't worry about it. They'll find another guy.
Yeah.
And
I don't know.
That's going to be hard,
you can only
dude.
say so much. Yeah.
And that's a really nice piece of your defense there that you're losing. Sorry, Tyler Anderson, I forgot your R. Between Weston Schultz, Jonah Colbaum, Jalen Porras, Drew Bessie, Jacob Murphy at long snapper. Got to always mention the long snapper.
Got to.
Joshua Miller, who still had 81 tackles and 11 tackles for a loss and didn't make the all-conference team. That's going to be the hardest part, I think, for me. if you find some halfway decent dude to play quarterback, you've got the weapons for him. Man, you got to get that defense together, because if not, you're going to have trouble extending that season winning streak, or in regular season winning streak against Northwestern. Yeah. That's going to be a toughie for you.
Yeah, and I think too, a weird thing with Morningside this year was that their defense looked mortal. I feel like in the past, this is very nitpicking, right? Like this is all you could really do with teams of this caliber. But their defense looked mortal in the sense that they were not a top 10 defense like they usually are, to where they are just dominating on both sides of the ball. Their offense was, no question about it. Their offense totally was. They got into some shootouts, and that's fine. You win most of them, but it's something to note, especially with those guys leaving.
Live by the sword, die by the sword a little bit here. You got to make sure you've got the dudes, but no, you're 100% correct with that. And really, that comes into very sharp focus when you look at the reigning champs. And you see top 10 in offense, 5th in offense, 4th in defense, and almost an even 3 yards per play difference. And, this team is losing the quarterback they started last season with, and they're upgrading.
Which is crazy, by the way.
It is absolutely absurd, and we referenced it earlier. That Concordia game, they were down 21-28 at the break. Jalen Gramstad comes in, rips off like 205 yards passing, 220 yards rushing, and about 17 billion touchdowns in that half. And
they were only down 10-0, by the way.
Okay, it felt like 28-0.
I was going to say it felt like 28-0.
Yeah, and Gramstad comes in and lights the world on fire, and I can't imagine, and I talked about this with Matt McCarty, like having to have that conversation with Blake Fryer and going, sorry, dude, but you watching what I'm watching? But my gosh, just an embarrassment of embarrassment of riches coming back. You've got a first team all conference running back in Connor McQuillan, a second team all conference running back coming back in Logan Meyer. Between Meyer, McQuillan, and Gramstad, that is, 43 rushing touchdowns. This is a team that held on to the football for very short amounts of time and still made you feel like you had faced a ground and pound team.
I mean, some of the stats you throw out with Northwestern from this past year, like you can barely fathom happening on a football field. And I think Gramstad, like we get to see Gramstad next season on a full game count. He didn't even play. He didn't even start in all 11 games during the regular season.
Now,
how's that?
I will say, Kaiser did make him. He's still shown against Kaiser. There is no doubt about it. But Kaiser was able. That was the most containment that I'd seen of Gramstad. I mean, I'm trying to go back and pull the box score so I can back up the eye test. They made him look mortal.
This was also a Kaiser defense that was top 5 defensively in SP+, right? If I remember.
Yeah, they're number 4.
Yeah, so holy cow.
Okay, so Gramstad was 14 of 19 through the year for 247, 3 touchdowns, and 22 attempts for 128 yards on the ground. And I want to say that a lot of that came in the fourth quarter.
True.
If my memory serves me correctly. So through three quarters, Kaiser was holding Gramstad down, but that's the only team I'd seen do that with any regularity.
Mm-hmm.
Look, when you got a wide receiver like Story, you're gonna be fine. And I did miss one there. Jacob Dragstra is coming back as well at defensive line. But you do lose three all-conference linebackers, three all-conference offensive linemen, two all-conference linebackers, and two first-team all-conference defensive backs. You got a hard row to hoe here.
Mm-hmm. And they're losing Parker Fryer, who has been the heart and soul of that defense for however long now. The defensive brother of Blake Fryer,
Yeah, right.
who is just unreal. He's so good. It's insane.
And
So
I think you're going to see that because Parker did not
yeah,
graduate. Parker's now in FCS. Parker's now playing
really?
for South Dakota.
Oh my God, I
He
didn't know
joined his
that.
brother Blake. So here's how this offseason went. Blake went to transfer. Blake was going to transfer, had signed his LOI with Grandview. Grandview had announced the transfer of Blake Fryer. I don't know if that tweet's still up, but I remember seeing it and retweeting it. And then I want to say it's South Dakota. It's one of them. It's either South Dakota, South Dakota State, one of those two. I'll look it up here real quick. It is South Dakota. So South Dakota comes calling for him as a coach, and Blake says, "Yeah, that sounds great. Actually, making money doing this." And and unfortunately for Northwestern, it's really easy to get your brother the amazing all-world linebacker when you're a coach on staff.
Yeah. Also on a South Dakota roster last year that struggled on defense really badly. If you can get a proven commodity, like you're gonna go call it. You're gonna pull as many strings as you can.
We've seen NAIA linebackers go from NAIA to FCS and do well. I mean, we saw it last year. The linebacker from Olivet Nazarene goes and wins a natty
Oh
in,
God,
yeah.
that's right. I forgot about that.
And the name escapes me right now, which they're gonna roast me, I'm sure, but I can't keep all these names in my head. Yeah, from Olivet Nazarene, and is their, I want to say, is their like leading tackler for South Dakota State, and goes and gets a ring at the FCS level, and boy, that's a way. That is a way to get your name out there to the NFL. Is go
Yeah,
there, put up some gaudy numbers, and you're going to have a couple more scouts at an FCS game. That's okay.
yeah. And as much as it sucks for programs like Northwestern and Olivet and Nazarene that lose these guys to FCS programs, it is a testament to how competitive the NAIA is compared to what people think it is at the
Yeah,
end of the day.
it's
So
not that far. It's not that far removed. The top players are still going to be your top players, and I tell you, Matt, it's going to drive me absolutely bat crap crazy until I can actually go find
they
it.
find his name.
So I'm going to go look now.
I mean, all this to say, Northwestern's going to have a lot to replace.
Jason
Still,
Freeman. Jason
there it
Freeman.
is.
There it is. I didn't
There
forget
it
about you,
is.
Jason. 30 tackles in one game makes you really hard to forget.
Yeah.
So you return your quarterback, you return your running backs, you return the majority of your wide receivers. You're going to lose Cade Mosier, which
Mhm.
is a big set of shoes to fill. Most of your D-line returns. A majority of your linebackers return. Half your DBs return. I think Northwestern's going to be fine, honestly.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge for them is not going to be personnel. The biggest challenge for Northwestern is if they can figure out how to get properly motivated again to line it up from the top of the mountain and do it all over again and climb the next one.
For sure. It'll be interesting to see. I'm excited.
So as we go through, we told you that we would do a little bit of comparison here as we went through the divisions and the conferences. Just to remind you, in average SP plus, the AAC started us out with a 73 and a third average SP plus. The Frontier sat at 42 and 2/3. GPAC is at 39.91. That really helps when you have number one and number two. And so I would say, yes, that number's better, and the GPAC has the higher end talent. But when you're comparing the two conferences, I think the Frontier has the better back half.
I refuse to agree because I'm biased, so I'm not going to agree with you on that.
Well, fine. I can accept that. But let's do some picks. Let's
There
do
you
some
go.
picks. This is going to be fun. I'll go first. I'm going to regret this pick. I know I'm going to regret this pick because I've done this before and it's come back to bite me in the rear end. And that's going to be, I'm going to take Northwestern to be the winner. I did this 2 years ago. It bit me. But, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on someone. My dark horse, like we said, you can't really call Dordt a dark horse anymore. So you have to find someone else. Now, to us, remember, dark horse is a team that's going to cause a lot of problems. It's a team that's going to be difficult to deal with. That's going to outperform expectations, and for me, that's going to be Concordia. The Bulldogs return enough players and were good enough a year ago that I think Concordia has a chance to be and maybe even an 8-2 team next year. And if you play well enough in those two losses to Morningside and Northwestern, I mean it's just death taxes and losing to Morningside and Northwestern. You've got a shot of maybe finding your way into the bottom side of these playoffs. John, on the other hand, is going to be is going to take the safe bet, rolling with the Stangs. I can't say I blame him because that is the safe pick. His dark horse is Midland. It's an interesting pick. I think they might fall back a little bit, but I'm not going to doubt Midland. Matt, who you taking?
Corey, are Morningside, are they underdogs? Is it underdog season for Morningside? Because I'm taking Northwestern to win the conference.
Do
I'm
not.
doing it.
Don't you
Are we
dare tell
are we
Steve
saying it?
Ryan. Don't you dare
Are we
tell Steve Ryan that Morningside is an underdog.
are we putting it out there for the world to hear, Corey? Is this what we're going with?
How many
Because I'm taking
DMs?
Northwestern.
How many
Holy
DMs am I
cow.
going to get? Morningside is not an underdog.
I just love causing problems for you because I'm also taking Northwestern. I think Jalen Gramstead is just going to run through the conference again.
It's a
I think
possibility.
they reload well enough on defense, and their defense was also super elite. Like metrics wise, defense was technically better than their offense, which, if you can imagine that, was crazy.
It's absurd.
Um, bringing back all those guys.
Honestly, I think that if you had played Gramstad all year, that you'd see like 2 and 4 offensive,
Yeah,
defensive. I think having those first that front half with Fryer, yeah, because all the games matter, and so
it's
all that
true.
aggregates. So
Yeah,
yes, on average, Northwestern's defense was better than their offense, but you look at the tail of the tape through the season, and we can see what happens.
yeah. I mean, either way, this is still a Northwestern team that's going to be elite on both sides of the ball again. And I don't know. I think they, at least for next season, will be able to beat Morningside again, or at least win the conference title. Because they play twice if they play in the conference title. So
So that is going to be, to me, that's the biggest one to watch, because
yeah.
Northwestern, or rather Morningside. Let me see if I can pull a history here. That game is going to be October 28th in Orange
Oh wow,
City. Um,
that's late.
Northwestern or Morningside is riding a 3-game winning streak
Hmm.
against Northwestern. The
In
last
the yeah.
in the regular,
Yes, yeah.
regular
Regular
season.
season. Yeah.
Um, the last 10 matchups in the regular season, Morningside is 9-1.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a
There's still a
really
hump to
big
get over for
hurdle.
Northwestern.
It's a really
Yeah.
big hurdle.
Hmm.
Um, and you're just gonna have to put on your big boy pants, and you're gonna have to
Yep.
go out there and get the monkey off your back at some point. I mean, you can't lose every game forever.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that a national championship team still has a monkey on their back, though.
I
Don't you
know,
think?
right?
It's kind of funny. But geez, I mean, talk about two giants just going at it. Enough talk about the top dogs. My dark horse this year. I'm taking the Jimmies. I'm pretty sure I took the Jimmies last year too. I like what Mistro's doing over there. I think that they are going to fly under the radar again because they weren't quite in that middle tier. I mean, they were on the outside looking in at the bottom part of that middle tier, like not quite at the winning record way of it. But I think with quarterback and maybe some spots in your D line being the only areas of concern where you're going to have to replace guys, like, I don't know. They've been on an upward trajectory for the last couple of years, and I think they can put it together and cause some issues.
Yeah, I mean, when you're starting from where Jamestown was starting,
Yes.
this is a team in 2019 who was 2-9. 2020 was 1-7. And you start to see it in 2021. They were again 2-9. I mean, we're still talking about a team that has not been great recently and is starting to put together. And we just see you 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 see the makings of it, and 2 years from now, when they do start to emerge, we're going to be able to point back and say, we've been telling you this.
Hmm.
We've been telling you this since 2021, and if you listened, you would have known.
I would also just like to put the record out there. I would have obviously said Dakota Wesleyan because they're the obvious choice, but Corey didn't let me. So let
I
that be known to
I
the
could not. I
audience.
couldn't let you pull a Connor Darnell for our friends from NAIAFBALL. I couldn't let you embarrass yourself like that. Um, but that being said, you know the real championship team, is absolutely our patrons and what they do, and how they support us, making sure that we're able to keep going and pay the bills. And these guys are the ones that get it done. So very thankful for all of them, and what they do. And honestly, if you want to support what we do, it's so very important to us. Become a patron. You get early access to articles. If that's your thing, you get your name read out if that's your thing. But honestly, the satisfaction of knowing that you're doing, uh, a service for us and allowing us to undertake this uh, is the most beautiful thing to me, and supporting this level of football with your wallet. And honestly, it's $1 a month, and it's not going to put too much of a pinch on your wallet. But the intrepid souls that are our backers are DSU Cone, Kyle Gregory, Darren, Tyler Pierce, Bob Boone, Justin Hoffman, Roger Meyer, Steve Speakman, Jeremy Vobble, Brian Shake. Jeremy Vobble, the Midland fan over there. Gotta call him out there. JT Side Shots. That's a great job with GPAC photos, and anytime you see
Awesome job.
GPAC photos,
Yep.
it's Jeremy Vobble. So we're so thankful for him both supporting us and making sure we have great photos to use from the GPAC. Brian Shake, Shirley LaBella, Julian Shager, Fred Christensen, Nate Soapbeer, Alex Garcia, Stephen Cutler, Jerry Quickle, Julie Lout, Ace Wellen, Tim Burrow, Marty Seabolt, Dale Norton, Justin Cobb, Nathan Moore, Nick Ryan, and Hayden Ferrigno. And man, we have, I think if I counted correctly, we're at about we have 10 conferences or nine conferences and divisions left. We've got about 10 weeks left to go into the season. I know it just, man, in the late part of July, it's going to seem like it's going to be forever, but we're going to get there one piece at a
Sneaks up on
time.
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And August 24th. It's not that far away.
It's 2.5 months.
It'll be here before you know it. We'll be talking about the
Yeah.
paint bucket game. We'll be talking about all sorts of week 0 fun. Stay with us through the off season as we preview every team in the NAIA. For my co-host Matt Schwartzler, I am Corey Thorpe, and we'll see y'all next week. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the NAIAFBALL podcast presented by AdCraft USA. Be sure to contact them for all your custom apparel, merch, and uniform needs. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to the podcast as well as to our YouTube channel. Leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you'd like to support what we do, head over to patreon.com/NAIAFBALL and become a patron. We can't do what we do without our sponsors and listeners like you.